Well, hello, and thanks for watching another episode of News of the Pews, where you can count on unapologetic 2A advocacy. Gun rights are human rights. Last week, AK Daddy bought a silencer without a tax stamp, and now everybody's losing their minds. But the most important part is not who got the first one. It's the mess created by everybody who came after him. As I reported last week, Congress dropped the NFA taxes on silencers, short barrel firearms, and AOWs to $0 in the big bloated spending bill. Then Judge James Wesley Hendricks ruled that the registration scheme could no longer be justified under Congress's taxing power and enjoined the ATF from enforcing much of it against the plaintiffs, covered members, and some customers. The 7-day stay expired, DOJ did not seek an emergency stay, and Silencer Shop handed unregistered whisper pickles to Brandon Herrera and Texas Representative Wes Verdell after telling ATF when and where it was gonna happen. Since then, more dealers have started doing transfers without a tax stamp on just a 4473. Even Maricopa County Sheriff Jerry Sheridan and congressional candidate Mark Lamb got in on the party at Scottsdale Gun Club, my second favorite SGC. These are public figures with a lot to lose, accepting advertised transfers from licensed dealers in front of cameras. They're not just influencers chasing TikTok clout. But before you start bullying your local gun shop into selling a can over the counter, there are some tripwires. NSSF published guidance Monday morning, and the legal plumbing is a mess. For example, a dealer can record a silencer as sold in his bound book, but the National Firearms Registration and Transfer Record still lists him as the lawful possessor until a Form 4 is processed. Short-barreled rifles and shotguns are even messier. The 1968 Gun Control Act says a licensed dealer cannot sell an SBR or SBS without specific authorization from the Attorney General, which of course would be the Form 4. So if your local shop is waiting to sell cans until the dust settles, don't bully them. An FFL is somebody's livelihood, and the government has murdered people over paperwork. They would not hesitate to destroy a business over this. The DOJ still has until October 5th to appeal. ATF has issued no useful guidance, and a future administration would love to line everybody up against the wall. At the same time, this gets a lot harder to unwind every single day. The government knew the first transfers were coming and they stood down. Now cans are flying off shelves in multiple states, and they're landing with legislators, candidates, and a sitting sheriff. Every single transfer contributes to the common use issue if the feds try to walk this back. And dealer sales are only half of the story. If you're covered by this ruling, you can make silencers and short-barreled firearms at home. A homemade silencer can be simple, cheap, and disposable. Of course, YouTube won't let me tell you how to make one, but the search term freeze plug should get you pointed in the right direction. And whether or not you're in a protected class, it is my entirely unprofessional opinion that control freaks will never manage to put this gin back in the bottle. I'm not a lawyer because my parents were married, but that's just how I see it. But hey, it would be impossible for me to produce quality 2A propaganda without you. That's right, this video is not sponsored, so I literally could not make it without your generous support. So if you happen to be in a comfortable place, please consider supporting this channel by joining my Patreon. Members get early access to scripts and videos, as well as private Discord access, which is particularly important to me because I get to communicate with you a lot more directly about what's really happening in real time. Or, if you want to support me, but you'd like to get some fly threads out of the deal, perhaps I can interest you in one of these fashionable torso coverings for only $15. But whether you buy merch or donate directly at the links down there in the doobly-doo, and of course right here, your help is what keeps this thing going, and I am incredibly grateful for your generous support. But if you're not in a comfortable place, please don't feel pressured. You don't owe anyone else a thing. Just enjoy this 2A propaganda at the price of free $99 and continue to pray for us. Somehow managing to win and lose at the very same time, Connecticut Attorney General William Tong won a default judgment against Indie Games, but lost the $7.7 million settlement he really wanted. Connecticut sued the Florida company for shipping unserialized gun parts into the state and tried to get the judge to award $5,000 for every day their website was active. It is bonkers that Connecticut can sue a company in Florida in the first place for something that's perfectly legal in Florida. They should not be allowed to infect free states with their control freak herpes. Honestly, it should be perfectly legal to smuggle guns into the occupied zone. Arms trafficking is a human right. Unfortunately, Indie Guns decided to employ the novel legal strategy of not showing up to court, so Judge Daniel Clow enjoined them from shipping to Connecticut, which is kinda, what they were already not doing.
I'm leaving.
Okay then, that was always allowed.
Because the only evidence the state could produce that Indie Guns had sold anything at all to someone in Connecticut is the clever sting operation where an investigator bought an 80% lower. Then Indie Guns called them up and said, hey, we can only ship to law enforcement in Connecticut. So the investigator gave him his cop ID. Well, AG Tong can strut around like he won something, but in every way that matters, Indie Guns absolutely killed it without even stepping on the field. Connecticut also seems to believe a man can be trusted with clients, money, confidential information, and the machinery of the courts, but not a pistol. The ironically named attorney Justin Freeman pleaded guilty to felony tax evasion in 2018 after underreporting more than $1.2 million in income. He served 8 months, and because his conviction was a felony, state and federal law bar him from possessing a gun for life. Now, you could argue that 8 months is nowhere near enough time to pay off $1 million debt to society when kids are doing a lot more time for stealing a bike or having a plant, but that's what the court decided. You could likewise argue that tax evasion is a civic duty. Still, Freeman has no other criminal history, no history of violence, and was readmitted to the Connecticut bar in 2022 and the federal bar in 2025. You folks know that I believe a man's rights should be fully restored when he's released. If you're not ready for him to have a gun, you best not let him out because he will have access to firearms when he gets out, whether you like it or not. But Judge Sarah Russell,
The name was Russell.
believes it's perfectly rational for him to practice law but not carry a gun. Freeman didn't forget to return a library book. He committed a serious crime. But Connecticut has formally decided he is rehabilitated enough to serve as an officer of the courts while insisting he can never again be trusted with the ordinary rights of citizenship. And finally, the Justice Department has settled its lawsuit against the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department for intentionally slow-walking carry permits because the lawsuit apparently scared the LASD straight. When DOJ sued last year, its investigation found more than 8,000 applications and only 2 permits issued. Applicants waited an average of more than 9 months, and some interviews were being scheduled nearly 2 years out. There is simply no excuse they could come up with to paint that as a functional permitting system. When the suit landed, the jig was up, and they were forced to abandon the blatant stonewalling. The department added personnel, installed new software, and cut wait times into compliance with California's deadlines. So DOJ settled. Good. A civil rights lawsuit exists to make the government stop violating people's rights, not keep lawyers billing until the sun burns out. I'm glad they were forced to obey the law, and I'm also glad the taxpayers of LA didn't get to take it in the shorts again for the bill. But it's frustrating that people responsible escaped consequences again. And I'm worried about the consequences for society as a whole as trust in the rule of law is eroded. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on how things will proceed if people continue to evade consequences down below. Well, friends, rounds complete on 2, but if you'd like to help me continue advocating for the Second Amendment, please consider buying some merch or donating at the links down there in the doobly-doo. And remember, this program was made possible by contributions from Bill Crocker, E. Senior, Ozark Pilgrim, ODA 564, Squirted Glizzies, and viewers like you. And now, for your moment of completion. I love you.
But you can shoot any kind of shape you want. This one, this Christmas tree round, man, this thing is pretty impressive.